Hey guys, today I'll show you a sci-fi horror TV series named Dark Season 1. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The drama begins in a small German town called Winden, surrounded by vast forests. The town's power supply is a nuclear power plant, which was designed and constructed in 1953 and scheduled to be shut down in 2020 according to the government's nuclear phase-out policy. So far, it has been the longest-running nuclear power plant in Germany without any accidents. The boy, Jonas, had his father end his own life by hanging on June 21, 2019, leaving behind a suicide note. The envelope was marked, "Do not open before November 4, 2213. The note was placed beside a family portrait, in which everyone was all smiling happily, except for the father. The father's death had a significant impact on the entire family. The grandmother, named Inez, secretly took the suicide note and temporarily cut off contact with her daughter-in-law and grandson. She spent her days waiting in front of the note for the moment when it could be opened. Jonas developed post-traumatic stress disorder and underwent counseling under the guidance of a doctor named Peter for several months. Half a year passed, and it was finally November 4th. By this time, Jonas's health condition had stabilized, and he was prepared to return to school. His mother, Hannah, seemed to be the person who recovered the quickest from the tragedy, and at that moment, she was romantically involved with another man named Nielsen. Their intimate moment was interrupted by the sound of their son downstairs. Hannah confessed her love to Nielsen, who replied with a half-hearted gesture before climbing out of the window and leaving. It turns out that Nielsen was already married. He had simply come over during his morning run to have a exercise with the widow. As a local police officer, Nielsen was married to Kathy, the principal of the town's school. Together, they were raising 3 children, Magnus, Martha, and Mikkel. Like most multi-child families, mornings were always hectic. Magnus couldn't find his jacket. Martha wanted to participate in a hunger strike to support African refugees, and Mikkel insisted on wearing a skeleton costume to school. Amid the chaos, their mother Kathy managed everything with order, but she couldn't convince Mikkel to change his clothes. Nielsen often indulged their children and enthusiastically watched Mikkel perform a magic trick with a yellow chess piece. However, when Nielsen asked how he did it, Mikkel replied that he shouldn't ask him how he did it, but when he did it. Jonas returned to school after a long absence and was greeted by his close friend Bartosz. Bartosz had claimed that he would keep Jonas's psychological treatment a secret, with the excuse that he had gone to France as an exchange student. As they entered the assembly hall, Jonas saw Martha, whom he had previously had a crush on, only to find out she was now Bartosz's girlfriend. Recently, a boy named Eric had gone missing, and the town was plastered with missing person posters. Eric's parents went to the police station almost daily, hoping to find their son as soon as possible. Kathy urged students to inform the police if they had any clues about the missing boy. The police officer Nielsen was nonchalant about Eric's disappearance, thinking that the boy had simply run away from home. His colleague Charlotte suspected that someone had abducted him and even thought of Nielsen's younger brother Mads, who had disappeared without a trace 33 years ago and had never been found. This had always been a source of pain for Nielsen's mother, who would often wander in the forest where her youngest son had gone missing, hoping to find him. This time, she found a discarded chocolate wrapper, which happened to be her younger son's favorite brand. She even thought that the boy Eric's disappearance might be related to that of her younger son all those years ago. Nielsen didn't care, and after leaving his mother's house, he called Hannah to arrange another smelly exercise that evening. Meanwhile, Kathy found a strand of hair in her husband's jogging suit, along with the scent of another woman's perfume. Hannah is a technician at the nuclear power plant. Today, her task is to give a free finger massage to the current plant director, Alec, who is Bartosz's father. Alec arrived alone in Winden town 33 years ago. He has a strange scar with a pattern on his back that has been bothering him lately. As Hannah massages him, she tells him that the soreness in his scar might be a sign of an impending change in the weather. Rain is likely on its way. Eric's disappearance has not only worried his parents, but also the local hotel owner, Regina, who has been struggling to attract guests. No one wants to vacation in a place where a child has gone missing. With no income, Regina is unable to repay her loans. In the evening, a parent-teacher conference is held at the school, led by police officer Charlotte and principal Kathy, to address the issue of Eric's disappearance. At the meeting, Regina and Kathy confront each other, while Hannah sneaks away to a corner of the campus to secretly meet with Nielsen. They share a passionate kiss. Meanwhile, in a nursing home, an old man with a peculiar ear keeps repeating, "It's happening again." He stumbles to the parent-teacher conference and repeats the phrase to the parents. The old man's name is Helga, and he is Dr. Peter's father and Charlotte's father-in-law. Charlotte assumes her father-in-law is having a dementia episode and quickly takes him away. As they leave, rain begins to fall in the town. Helga then says that it's too late. The caves are located deep within the town's forest, and parents usually warn their children to stay away. Bartosz wants to, so he enlists Jonas and the Nielsen siblings for a late-night adventure. Due to the parent-teacher conference and the babysitter being sick, Magnus has to bring Mikkel along. When the group arrives near the caves, they can't. It turns out that Franziska, who had been flirting with Magnus earlier, overheard their plan and took the first. Bartosz pushes Franziska to the ground and snatches the back. At that moment, terrifying sounds come from the caves, and it seems as if something strange is running through the surrounding area. The group's flashlights start flickering and everyone turns to run away. Only Jonas remembers to grab Mikkel as they flee. However, halfway through their escape, Jonas falls, and when he gets back up, Mikkel is gone. Jonas hears someone calling his name and turns to see his dead father, covered in black grime, staring at him. Terrified, Jonas runs away. When he reaches the main road, the rain in the town is pouring heavily. The group realizes that Mikkel is missing. As the children approach the caves, the time is exactly 22:13. Jonas's grandmother, Inez, who bears a mole on her face, opens the suicide note and is in tears by the time she finishes reading it. The children who can't find their brother call the police, and their parents receive a call and rush to the scene. The rain in the forest has stopped, and the 5 children shiver together. The mothers immediately embrace their children. Jonas stands there, dazed, unsure if what he saw was a hallucination. Upon seeing that 2 of his children are safe, Nielsen rushes into the forest in search of Mikkel. The next morning, Officer Charlotte and her team arrived at the cave for an investigation. Her husband, Peter, called her, stammering, wanting to say something, but ultimately saying nothing. After hanging up, he silently began reading the Bible. The police found a boy's body in the forest, and Nielsen rushed to the scene. However, the body wasn't that of Mikkel or the missing Eric. The boy's eyes were scorched. Beside him, there was an old cassette tape still spinning. Meanwhile, Eric was in a strange children's room tied to a chair with a belt. A red string was tied around his neck with a 1986 penny coin attached. As a machine closed, it seemed like a horrifying experiment was about to begin. On the surface, there were 2 missing children by far, Eric and Mikkel. But actually, there was another case hidden, the disappearance of Nielsen's younger brother 33 years ago. The police conducted a preliminary investigation of the boy's body. The boy was about 12 years old, estimated to have died 16 hours prior. His eyes were completely burned, making his face unrecognizable, and his ears were severely damaged. His eardrums were destroyed, and the ear stones responsible for maintaining balance were dislocated. The boy's clothing and shoes were all from the 1980s, and his clothes were covered in red soil not native to the area, suggesting that the body was moved there. What's more, around his neck hung a 1986 West German penny coin tied with a red string. The music playing from his portable cassette player was also from the 1980s. Now, Officer Charlotte has 2 missing boy cases on her hands. She hands the investigation to the one-eyed man and tells her officers not to publicize the case of the unidentified boy's body. She contacts the Missing Persons Department in secret, asking everyone in the surrounding area to help solve the case discreetly. The town's residents are already on edge, and further agitation is the last thing they need. The 2 disappearances are reported on the radio, but for some reason Peter becomes extremely upset upon hearing the news and starts to cry. While Nielsen's mother is on the phone, Nielsen's father sneaks a bloody sweater into the washing machine and then prepares to join the police search team. When Nielsen's mother finishes her call, she asks her husband why he wasn't home the previous night. He brushes her off with a vague excuse, but her intuition tells her that their grandson's disappearance is somehow connected to the disappearance of their younger son years ago. Nielsen's father searches with the team, but he doesn't seem hopeful about finding his grandson Mikkel. He secretly pockets a brown notebook, while Nielsen's mother places her younger son's favorite childhood toy at his grave, replacing the one already there. Nielsen suspects that Mikkel went missing in the caves and discovers a locked iron door with a danger sign that seems to lead to the nuclear power plant. Worried that his son might have gone through the door, Nielsen wants to search the power plant, but it's a high-security area that requires a warrant. He remembers a colleague once speculated that the current disappearances are connected to his younger brother's case 33 years ago, and now he starts to believe it too. Both the missing children and the discovered boy's body were found near the power plant, so searching there is of utmost importance. Meanwhile, at the power plant, Alec instructs Eric's father to move certain items as soon as possible and finish by tonight. The police are still conducting a thorough search nearby, and a mysterious man carrying a large suitcase watches from a distance. Eventually, he arrives at the hotel run by Alec's wife and requests a room. The mysterious man also has a brown notebook, and after washing up, it's revealed that he has a noticeable strangulation mark on his neck and multiple scars on his back. He begins to set up the room, hanging pictures of a labyrinth and a starry sky on the walls, and placing a book about time travel on the desk. The mysterious man uses a key to open his suitcase, revealing an old machine inside. It started raining again in Windentown. Officer Charlotte tells Nielsen that Alec is obstructing the search warrant's issuance. Clearly, family is the most important thing to Nielsen. He rejects Hannah's 12th call and gazes longingly at a family photo on his phone. At the same time, Kathy stands in the rain, staring into the distance, hoping for her son's return. Magnus returns home in the rain and punches the wall until his hands bleed, unable to alleviate his guilt. Martha refuses a call from her boyfriend Bartosz. Mikkel's disappearance has shattered their once happy home. Nielsen ventures out in the rain to the nuclear power plant. Now, he's just a desperate father who's lost his child, pleading with Alec to let him in just to check the area near the caves. However, Alec won't budge, insisting that without a search warrant, no one is allowed in. Frustrated, Nielsen rushes back to the police station, only to find Hannah waiting for him in the lobby. Feeling guilty about their affair, Nielsen quickly pulls Hannah into the archive room. Hannah says she's there to comfort him and passionately kisses him. But with his son missing, Nielsen has no interest in such activities and rejects Hannah's advances. With no other options, Nielsen checks the evidence at the police station, hoping to find a clue. He discovers that Eric's father has a van, and there are traces of a van driving on a dirt road near the disappearances. Eric's father is also a driver at the nuclear power plant and has unrestricted access. Nielsen suspects Eric's father is involved. He sneaks into Eric's father's storage shed and finds an underground metal chain. Following the chain, he pulls out a round plastic bag. Eric's father rushes over with a gun, demanding Nielsen to put it down. Inside the bag, there's only marijuana. It turns out Eric and his father are selling marijuana to make money. Eric's father insists he wasn't at the plant the previous night and had nothing to do with Mikkel's disappearance. He starts asking about his son's whereabouts, and all Nielsen can do is apologize. Both men are just fathers who have lost their children. Elsewhere, Jonas enters the room where his father hanged himself. The walls are covered with his father's smeared and painted over artwork. He accidentally discovers a map hidden in a wooden panel. The map shows the interior of the Winden cave and a message about a hidden passage. Jonas realizes his father had many secrets. He asks his mother if she loved and understood his father. Hannah responds indifferently, saying she only seemed to love her husband as a father and knew nothing else about him. This rainy night is anything but peaceful. Alec secretly instructs workers to load something into a large truck. In the forest, someone is dragging Eric's corpse. Nielsen's father secretly gets up from bed while his wife pretends to sleep. Upon her husband's departure, she opens her eyes. A helpless Nielsen returns home to Kathy, who embraces her husband. The couple leans on each other, shedding tears. The mysterious man, meanwhile, posts newspaper clippings about Mikkel on the wall, changing the question to "Mikkel in which time?" Suddenly, the lights in the town flicker before returning to normal. Charlotte steps out of the police station to see dead birds scattered on the ground. Time rewinds to the night of the incident, inside Winden Caves. Mikkel struggles to find an exit. As he reaches the exit, dawn breaks. He immediately runs to his house, but the parked cars have strange designs and his keys won't open the door. A stranger in a leather jacket opens the door, claiming it to be his house, and he doesn't recognize Mikkel. The leather jacket man's girlfriend calls him to school. Mikkel sees a newspaper at the door and is shocked to read about the Chernobyl disaster aftermath. It's now November 5th, 1986. By far, the drama shows many secrets of the townspeople of Winden. Eric is dead, his body's condition similar to the boy's corpse found in the forest. They were likely killed in the same way. As Eric was experimented on, a nearby TV broadcasted theories about bending time and space, researching ways to enter black holes. Perhaps that is the experiment's purpose. Mikkel arrives 33 years in the past, revealing the cave's time-traveling properties, and the neighboring nuclear power plant is undoubtedly involved. Mikkel returns home, but things seem different from what he remembers. Confused, he hesitates at the door before gathering the courage to enter. Lying on the living room couch is a grieving woman who, upon hearing Mikkel calling for his mother, jumps up excitedly. However, when she sees an unfamiliar child, her eyes fill with disappointment. Mikkel is terrified and breaks free from the woman, running away. It turns out a boy had mysteriously disappeared recently, with missing person posters plastered all over town. Mikkel wanders to the school, hoping to find his principal mother, but encounters the leather jacket man's girlfriend instead. He learns the current principal is a man, not his mother Kathy. The sheriff Egon, who has been investigating the missing boy, suddenly receives a report from a ranch owner about 33 sheep dying collectively in the pasture with no external injuries. Staring at the strangely deceased flock, the ranch owner quietly recites the text from the Bible. Sheriff Egon is in his office, preparing to file a report on the death of 33 sheep. Mikkel, who hasn't found his mother, comes to the police station, hoping to find his policeman father. When he says his father's name is Nielsen, Sheriff Egon seems to misunderstand something. He looks at the disheveled Mikkel, whose face bears injuries, and assumes he's a poor kid bullied by the leather jacket man. Mikkel confirms from Sheriff Egon that the current date is November 5th, 1986. He realizes he has indeed traveled through time. This is too unbelievable, so Mikkel chooses to remain silent. Now, many of the characters he sees in 1986's Dimension are younger versions of those people in 2019. The first home Mikkel returns to is his father Nielsen's house, the leather jacket man. The grieving woman inside is actually Nielsen's mother. The child who disappeared a few weeks ago is Nielsen's younger brother, Mads. Nielsen's girlfriend is Kathy, Mikkel's future principal mother. Sheriff Egon is actually the grandfather of the hotel owner, Regina. Sheriff Egon calls someone to take Mikkel to the hospital for treatment and goes to confront Nielsen about bullying the innocent boy. Mikkel, alone in the office, picks up the phone and dials his parents' cell phones, but only gets a disconnected tone. He secretly takes a lighter from the table, plays with it, and puts it in his pocket. The office desk has newspaper clippings about the missing boy and a photo of Nielsen with the boy. Mikkel looks at the photo and thinks it's familiar. In fact, this is the photo Nielsen saved with his younger brother. Before he can think more, the nurse with a mole on her face, who later reveals to be Jonas's grandmother Inez in the 2019 timeline, arrives to take him away. Sheriff Egon goes to Nielsen's house and finds the front door unlocked. The young Nielsen is in his room playing a game with loud music. When Sheriff Egon warns him not to bully the weak boy, Nielsen is confused and even thinks Sheriff Egon has drunk too much. Now his younger brother is missing, and the police have made no progress. Nielsen is already dissatisfied and has contempt for Sheriff Egon's baseless accusations. Sheriff Egon doesn't want to argue with this notorious troublemaker and turns to leave, but notices animal hooves on the table. He suspects Nielsen is responsible for the death of the sheep in the pasture. Before he can ask any questions, Nielsen's mother appears. The only thing she cares about is whether her younger son has been found, and Sheriff Egon has no answer. The medical examiner quickly performs an autopsy on the dead sheep and finds the cause of death to be sudden cardiac arrest. They suspect the sheep died of fright. Sheriff Egon wonders if Nielsen went to scare the sheep. However, the medical examiner says an ordinary person couldn't have done it, and all the sheep's limbs are intact with no missing hooves. It seems the animal hooves at Nielsen's house are unrelated to the sheep. Upon further examination, the medical examiner discovers something even more bizarre. The eardrums of the sheep have been completely destroyed. On the other side, Mikkel receives proper treatment at the hospital. However, he becomes withdrawn and refuses to reveal his name, only shedding tears alone. Nurse Inez gently wipes away his tears and leaves him some books to pass the time. Touched by the nurse's kindness, Mikkel finally opens up and tells her he comes from the future. Nurse Inez is somewhat surprised, but seeing the book Captain Future among the ones she left, she assumes Mikkel's words are just childish nonsense. On this day, Sheriff Egan's daughter, Claudia, starts her new role as the director of the nuclear power plant. It was rare for a woman to be a leader in those days, and her career success makes her glow with confidence. On her way to drop off her daughter at school, she recites her inauguration speech, but her daughter shows no interest in her mother's achievements. Claudia's daughter is Regina in the 2019 timeline. The middle-aged Helga with a peculiar ear works as a security guard at the nuclear power plant at that time and seems to have a crush on Claudia. When he sees her arriving for work, he expresses congratulations and gives her an inauguration gift. As soon as Claudia enters the plant, her assistant informs her that a reporter is waiting to interview her. In the end, she hands over the company's financial statements from the past 2 years. After flipping through just 2 pages, she senses something is off with the data and immediately seeks out the founder of the nuclear power plant, Bernd. On her way to Bernd's office, she encounters the reporter who wants to interview her. The reporter and Claudia seem to be having an affair, and he expresses his strong love for her. She needs to deal with her career issues, and when faced with the reporter's invitation for that evening, she doesn't give a clear answer. As she leaves, she casually brushes his hand with her fingers. This bearded reporter is actually Nielsen's father. Meanwhile, Bernd is packing up his belongings, preparing to retire. A family photo on his desk reveals that Helga is his son. As a review, the doctor in 2019, Peter, is Bernd's grandson and Helga's son. When Claudia arrives at the office, she wants to clarify the abnormal data. Bernd explains that since the Chernobyl incident, public trust in nuclear power plants has reached a low, and any small issue could impact the entire station. Almost everyone in Winden relies on the power plant for their livelihood. So many things must be kept secret. Claudia insists that since she has taken over, she needs to know the truth. Bernd then leads her to a fenced-off area in the forest, handing her a key and a lantern. Claudia unlocks the iron gate, which appears to be another entrance to the Winden cave. She slides down the rope and reaches the end, where she finds a mountain of yellow barrels with danger signs. The barrels contain hazardous nuclear waste, and it turns out the nuclear power plant has been secretly hiding all its unprocessable waste here. Shocked by this revelation, Claudia doesn't go to her appointment with the reporter and instead wants to be alone in her car to process the situation. She unwraps the gift from Helga, which is a book called Time Travel. As a reminder, this book also appeared in the hands of the mysterious man in 2019. While Claudia is exploring the cave, night falls and all the lights in town suddenly start flickering. Dead birds begin falling from the sky over the pasture. Sheriff Egon, who came to investigate, quickly hides in his car, watching the scene unfold in horror. In the forest, a girl is studying and sketching dead birds. She will become policewoman Charlotte in the future. Nielsen sits at a bus stop, and a young girl comes over to greet him. The look in Nielsen's eyes is full of love. She is the young Hannah. At the hospital, Mikkel takes advantage of the chaos and escapes from his room, heading straight to the Winden cave, hoping to return to his home in 2019. He takes out a lighter and walks in determinedly. At the same time, in 2019, Nielsen watches his helpless wife sleeping on Mikkel's bed. He's determined to find Mikkel. Since he can't enter the nuclear power plant, he sneaks to the Winden cave, hoping to break open the iron door with his bare hands. Back in the 1986 cave, Mikkel struggles to find an exit. He accidentally injures his leg and cries out for help. Miraculously, across space and time, the two seem to hear each other's movements. Excitedly, they head toward the sounds, but both just end up walking out of the cave without finding the person they're looking for. Exhausted, father and son sit down, separated by the time dimension. At this moment in 1986, inside a clock shop, a clockmaker is creating a device. As the components are assembled, the device starts to operate. This device is the same one found in the mysterious man's box. The door to time has officially opened, taking us back 33 years to the small town. The people in 2019 continue to investigate the missing Mikkel and Eric. The main person in charge of the case is police officer Charlotte. She and her husband, Dr. Peter, have been living separately for over a year, and they are heading for a divorce. In the morning, their 2 daughters, Franziska and Elizabeth, are never quiet. The older daughter's lipstick goes missing, and she blames her deaf-mute sister, Elizabeth. But Elizabeth puts on an innocent expression. Peter and Charlotte have separate schedules. Peter visits his father, Helge, at the nursing home. Helge's dementia worsens, and he mumbles that he has to tell him to stop. When Peter asks who he is, Helge falls into incoherent mumbling. Peter is saddened by his father's condition, but Helge gently touches his cheek, telling him not to be sad. It seems that a father's love never fades due to illness. Charlotte drives Elizabeth to school. On the way, she notices a monitoring box by the roadside and breaks it open to take out the memory card, which should contain recent vehicle records. Comparing it with the tire marks found earlier, she may be able to identify the criminal who abducted the boys. Charlotte drops her daughter off at school, agreeing to pick her up after class. The daughter affectionately kisses her mother's forehead before joining her little boyfriend, Yassine, to play. At the police station, the coroner is performing an autopsy on one of the dead birds that had fallen to the ground when the town's lights mysteriously flickered. Determining the cause of death will take some time. Looking at the white spots on the bird's body, Officer Charlotte is reminded of a similar situation that occurred 33 years ago. Even the missing persons cases from back then seem to have some inexplicable connections to the present. The one-eyed man reports to Charlotte that they haven't been able to find any information about the boy with the burnt lips and eyes among the recent missing persons list. Additionally, the source of the red clay found on the body remains a mystery. Charlotte instructs him to widen the range of years for comparison, while she retreats to her office to review the footage from the memory card. Charlotte estimates that Mikkel disappeared around 10 p.m. In the footage from that time, she sees her husband Peter's car. At this moment, Peter has just finished his visit to the nursing home and notices the red clay on the floor mat of the driver's seat. He quickly shakes it off, making sure no one is around, but can't help feeling emotional and wanting to cry. The red clay and his anxious demeanor suggest that Peter is somehow involved with the boy's dead body. Before Peter can let his emotions out, Charlotte calls him, asking where he was the night Mikkel disappeared and what he meant with the evasive phone call the next day. Unaware of his wife's suspicions, Peter lies and says he was at the office the entire time, and the phone call had no particular meaning. After hanging up, Charlotte drives to a flashy motorhome and is surprised to find a cross-dressing man inside. It turns out that over a year ago, Charlotte discovered her husband had been seeing the same cross-dressing sex worker. Although Peter swore to his wife that there would never be a next time, their relationship has been ice-cold ever since. Charlotte asks the cross-dresser if Peter visited him the night Mikkel disappeared. The cross-dresser, somewhat resentful, reveals that Peter hasn't visited him in over a year. It seems that their relationship isn't purely physical, and the cross-dresser may have genuine feelings for Peter. Charlotte then drives to the family's forest cabin and discovers tire tracks and red clay outside. Before she can think further, the coroner calls her, reporting that the dead birds had severely damaged eardrums, similar to the boy's body. The cause of death is falling from the sky due to loss of balance. The coroner speculates that an electromagnetic field disrupted their sensory systems, caused by some electronic device. The white spots on the birds' bodies are consistent with exposure to nuclear radiation, but all other indices are normal, making the situation very peculiar. The flashing lights in 2019 when Mikkel time-traveled, the death of the startled sheep in 1986 due to damaged eardrums, and the flickering lights in 1986 all indicate that the magnetic field changes during time travel. If these events occur every time someone time travels, then who else traveled on the night after Mikkel did? The night when birds died and fell into the grass in 1986 and outside the 2019 police station. When searching, Charlotte discovers a sealed bunker near the forest cabin. Upon entering, she finds it has been abandoned for a long time. Suddenly, she receives a phone call. Her police partner Nielsen is in trouble. It turns out the search warrant is delayed, so Nielsen decides to sneak into the nuclear power plant to check the connection to the cave. Unfortunately, he is caught by the power plant's staff. Charlotte has no choice but to help him, leaving her unable to pick up Elizabeth. So she asks her husband to do so instead. When Charlotte arrives at the power plant, she sees Nielsen, beaten and bloody, with a cold expression. Rain starts to fall in the town again. Charlotte scolds Nielsen for acting impulsively, but he doesn't listen. He stubbornly gets out of her car and walks alone in the pouring rain. Just then, Charlotte receives a call from Peter. Elizabeth is also missing. It turns out that school let out early because the teacher was sick. The girl waits for her mother but decides to walk home alone as it starts to rain. She finds a chocolate wrapper on the ground, picks it up curiously, and continues her journey. Peter has already searched their daughter's usual route to and from school but hasn't found her. So he calls Charlotte, who tells him to go home and call all their daughter's classmates. Charlotte searches the small roads in the pouring rain and finds the fox hat their daughter always wears. The couple reunites at home without any news of their daughter. After a year of coldness, Charlotte finally breaks down in her husband's arms. Franziska comes home, surprised to see her parents comforting each other, and learns of her sister's disappearance. The family reports her missing to the police and anxiously waits for news at home. Suddenly, Elizabeth returns. Charlotte embraces her and then angrily asks where she has been. The girl gestures to her parents that she met someone who gave her a pocket watch, claiming it belonged to her mother and that his name is Noah. Charlotte opens the watch to find her name engraved inside, seemingly a gift from someone. Franziska, seeing her sister has returned, excitedly hugs her but notices lipstick on her mouth, realizing she wasn't wrong about her sister this morning. She then slaps her sister, illustrating their complicated sisterly relationship. Before their joy of being reunited can fade, Peter receives a call from the police, saying that they accidentally found Helga in the forest. It turned out Helga took advantage of the nurse's inattention, sneaked out of the nursing home during the rain, and headed for the depths of the forest, where he encountered the police searching for Elizabeth. The next morning, a now awake Helgi grabs the nurse's hand, saying he must stop him. When Nurse Inez asks who he wants to stop, Helga replies, Noah. At the same moment, Yasin is walking to school alone when he finds a wooden toy on the ground. As he picks it up to examine it, a man wearing a raincoat with an obscured face stops him, saying he was sent by Noah. Yasin is filled with fear before his disappearance. Meanwhile, Magnus can't shake the feeling that something was off about Franziska, who suddenly appeared at the cave that night, so he keeps a close eye on her. Franziska receives a text message during class and immediately leaves. Magnus secretly follows her in the forest and finds her retrieving a stainless steel box beneath an abandoned railway track. She takes a bulging envelope from the box. Franziska returns to school, hides the envelope in her backpack, changes clothes, and practices gymnastics. Magnus watches her from outside the gym, captivated by her spinning and jumping. After she returns to the changing room, he confronts her with the envelope, which is filled with cash. He accuses her of drug trafficking to make money, but she is forced to tell the truth. She wanted to save money to leave the town after discovering a year ago that her father, Dr. Peter, was attracted to men, and her parents' marriage was in shambles, but neither wanted to get a divorce. The lie of maintaining a happy family makes Franziska sick. Seeing her vulnerable side, Magnus finally reveals his feelings and kisses her, leading to an unexpected romantic encounter. On the other hand, Jonah spends a long time studying the Winden Cave and decides to explore it in person. After all, he feels somewhat responsible for Mikkel's disappearance. As he enters the cave, he's unaware that a mysterious man watches him from a distance, checking the time on his watch. Jonas wanders around the cave using a map, but finds a stone wall instead of the expected passage. Frustrated, he leaves, only to find a red rope tied to his bicycle handlebars by someone unknown. At night, Jonas sleeps, unaware that the mysterious man sneaks into his room, takes the map of the cave from the drawer, and draws something on it. After the boy Yasin also goes missing, people still can't find any useful information regarding the missing cases. The only lead they have is the mysterious Noah. Charlotte has no choice but to ask Elizabeth to describe Noah's appearance. Peter looks at his frightened daughter and accuses his wife of being cold-hearted. But Charlotte is also unhappy, as there are many conflicts and secrets in their family. She takes out a printed sheet with Peter's car timestamp, which is precisely the night Mikkel disappeared. Peter was not at the clinic, and Charlotte no longer cares whether her husband had a secret rendezvous with the cross-dressing man. She only hopes he has nothing to do with the missing children, but Peter does not answer his wife. Officer Nielsen has been ignoring Hannah's calls lately, so the confused Hannah visits Nielsen and Kathy's house under the pretext of delivering food and inquires about Nielsen's whereabouts. Nielsen comes downstairs after a shower and sees Hannah eyeing him intently. He looks at Kathy in panic, but calmly says he's going to the police station. Hannah asks Nielsen to give her a ride home, and before Nielsen can think of an excuse to refuse, Kathy agrees on his behalf. In front of Hannah, Nielsen gently kisses his wife's forehead, making Hannah's expression twist with discomfort. Just as the two are about to leave, Kathy suddenly hugs Hannah and takes a deep sniff of her clothes like a dog. After they leave, Kathy turns serious, as Hannah's perfume smells exactly the same as the scent on her husband's morning jogging clothes. Nielsen takes Hannah to her doorstep and solemnly says he wants to end their improper relationship. However, Hannah is unwilling to let go of the love she secretly harbored for years. She only wants to be by Nielsen's side without seeking any status, but Nielsen does not entertain Hannah's plea. Mikkel's disappearance makes him realize that having an affair only gave him excitement, but his love belongs to Kathy and their child. He then forcefully asks Hannah to get out of the car and never contact him again. Hannah refuses to give up and watches the car drive away, thinking back to 1986. 33 years ago, the young Hannah always followed Nielsen around. Nielsen would chat with Hannah, but he only saw her as an ordinary friend. Whenever Kathy appeared, Nielsen would be drawn to her, and he would move to her side, holding her hand. The jealousy in Hannah's eyes back then was the same as it is now, filled with a destructive desire. One day, Hannah followed her father as he delivered goods in his truck. She met the mysterious Mikkel in the hospital, where he was opening a gift from Nurse Inez. He was always resistant to talking and seemed afraid of the people around him. Nurse Inez had gave him a book called Not Afraid. The two children of similar age started chatting, and Mikkel even performed a magic trick for Hannah. Later, when Hannah accompanied her father to deliver goods to a school, she accidentally saw Nielsen and Kathy enjoying their first romantic encounter in the gymnasium. This scene kept playing in her mind, jealousy clouding her vision. The devil opened her heart, and she weaved a perfect lie, accusing Nielsen of assaulting Kathy to Sheriff Egan. The sheriff recorded Hannah's statement and protected her identity as the informant. Nielsen was then arrested. Hannah remained the same both back then and now. If she couldn't have Nielsen, she would destroy him. Back in 2019, Officer Nielsen returns to the police station. Unable to share his inner turmoil with his wife, he confides in his colleague, Charlotte. 33 years ago, his brother disappeared, and Nielsen always blamed the alcoholic Sheriff Egan for being incompetent. But now, with a similar case of disappearance, he realizes he is even more incompetent. He betrayed his wife, had an affair, and can't find his son. He feels like a complete jerk. Charlotte proves to be a good listener, quietly taking in Nielsen's self-analysis before turning her thoughts back to the case. The 33-year time frame is too peculiar. Charlotte remembers her maternal grandfather, a watchmaker who was obsessed with various cosmic theories, believing in cycles and rebirth. He told her that the universe's cycle is 33 years, and after each cycle, the entire universe returns to its original position with precision. 33 years ago, young Charlotte felt that something was off about Windentown, and that feeling has returned. Everything happening now seems like a replay of the past. As the day goes by, Charlotte remains at the police station, looking at the sketch of Noah, the man who should be connected to all the disappearances. Nielsen returns home and embraces his wife, with the two lying on Mikkel's bed. Suddenly, Kathy asks Nielsen if he has ever cheated on her, and Nielsen replies that he never will. In Nielsen's heart, the one he loves will always be Kathy. In the hotel, the mysterious man packs his bags and leaves, handing a huge parcel to the hotel owner, Regina. He insists she delivers it tonight and requests to keep his room reserved for a few more days. The recipient of the parcel is none other than Jonas. Ever since Mikkel went missing, Bartosz has been unable to contact his girlfriend Martha, Mikkel's sister. Out of boredom, he can only study the phone of Eric, another missing boy. Suddenly the phone rings, and the man on the other end introduces himself as Noah. Bartosz assumes Noah is a marijuana supplier, so they agree to meet later that night. Feeling apprehensive about going alone, he calls Jonas over to his house, hoping to bring his best buddy along for the meetup. After leaving Bartosz's house, Jonas sits in front of his father's grave, lost in thought. The mysterious man appears uninvited, expressing gratitude to Jonas, whose father once saved his life. However, life is like a maze, and everyone is trapped within it. Few can discover this secret. The mysterious man speaks cryptically, claiming he will keep coming back until Jonas makes the right choice. With that, the man leaves. Jonas is left dumbfounded. Jonas arrives at the school theater where Martha is rehearsing for a play. The two meet backstage, reminiscing about their sweet love before Jonas's father had an accident. As a result, he vanished from her life, and in her frustration, Martha chose Bartosz. However, ever since Mikkel disappeared, Martha has been refusing Bartosz's calls, constantly hoping to get in touch with Jonas. Emotions are beyond one's control, and the two people who love each other stand face to face. Although they feel guilty for betraying Bartosz, Martha gives in to her heart and kisses Jonas. Unable to wait for Jonas, Bartosz reluctantly gets into Noah's car by himself. Noah is the very man depicted in the portrait. Even more astonishing is that he even appeared beside Mikkel in the 1986 timeline, discussing the origins of the universe and whether it was God's will. Noah holds a brown notebook in his hands, and he hasn't aged a bit over the years. After leaving Noah's car, Bartosz turns gloomy, and it's unclear what the two talked about. Jonas returns home to find the large parcel addressed to him. Inside is a handheld flashlight and a signal detector, along with a letter at the bottom of the box. It reads, "Do not open before 22:13 on November 4th. This is Jonas's father's last letter. However, compared to the one in the hands of his grandma, this one appears more damaged and aged." He opens the letter and starts reading. At the same time, Inez places the book Not Afraid on Jonas's father's tombstone. As Jonas reads, we finally glimpse the truth revealed in the last letter. On November 4th, 2019, Mikkel accidentally travels back to 1986. He can't find his way home and lives in that timeline instead. He's adopted and raised by nurse Inez, gets married, and has children. After 33 years pass, he chooses to end his own life, which finally reveals that Mikkel is Jonas's father, who had terminated himself. Let's briefly review the relationships of the characters we've met so far. The story revolves around 4 families in the small town of Winden. First, Bernd was the founder of the Winden nuclear plant. His son, Helga, has appeared in both middle-aged and older forms. Helga's son, Peter, seems to know a secret but has remained tight-lipped. Peter's wife is Charlotte, whose grandfather was a clockmaker. The children of Peter and Charlotte are Franziska and Elizabeth, both appearing as teenagers. Second, Sheriff Egon only appears in the 1986 timeline. Sheriff Egon's daughter, Claudia, is the plant director of 1986. Her daughter is the hotel owner, Regina, appearing as both a teenager and an adult. Regina's husband, Alec, is the plant director in 2019. Their child, Bartosz, appears only as a teenager. Third, Nielsen's father had an affair with Claudia when he was younger. He seems to know a secret and sneaks out at night. The couple, Nielsen and Kathy, appear as both teenagers and adults. They began dating in high school, and Nielsen was a bit of a troublemaker, but he still managed to become a police officer later. They have 3 children, Magnus, Martha, and Mikkel. Mikkel time-traveled back 33 years, married and had children, creating a paradox. Fourth, Inez is a nurse in her youth and the grandmother of Jonas. She adopted Mikkel, who is later Hannah's husband. Since her youth, Hannah has been infatuated with her neighbor Nielsen, Mikkel's father. She likely married Mikkel and had children possibly because she saw traces of Nielsen in him. Jonas is Mikkel's son. In a sense, he's a paradoxical product who shouldn't exist. After discovering his peculiar origins, Jonas begins to explore time travel, becoming a time traveler. Additionally, there are Noah and the mysterious man, whose identities are yet to be determined. They seem to be connected to the 4 families and are constantly guiding the youngsters to explore time. As the days pass since Mikkel's disappearance, the situation becomes severe. Officer Charlotte mobilizes the entire police force to search door to door and reviews records from the past 50 years, looking for similar cases in the town and nearby areas. Unbeknownst to anyone, Mikkel had already traveled back in time, his image captured in a photo from 1987. Nielsen reviews the 1986 file on the disappearance of his younger brother Mads and listens to the recorded testimony of their mother from back then, discovering something unusual. He returns to his parents' house for confirmation. Upon seeing his son, Nielsen's father gives him a hug, sympathizing with his pain of experiencing a missing child. In their mother's testimony, it was stated that their father was at home the night Mads disappeared, but Nielsen clearly remembers that his father returned late at night. His mother even prayed before her husband came home. Nielsen had never liked his father, and now, 33 years after the 2 disappearance cases with mysterious connections, he even suspects his own father to be the culprit. Just as father and son are about to confront each other, their mother, waking up from a nap, breaks the tense atmosphere. The emotional mother, who had never let go of her longing for her younger son, recounts the past to Nielsen. The 2 brothers would fight one moment and be close the next. During an argument, Mads got injured on his chin, leaving a scar, yet the brothers laughed it off. Nielsen wonders why his mother gave false testimony back then. She feels helpless because she knew where their father was. It turns out that when Mads disappeared, their father was having an affair with a woman named Claudia, and Claudia's daughter, Regina, was the last person to see Mads before he vanished. At this moment, Regina receives her pathology report, revealing she has breast cancer. An angry Nielsen comes to confront her. Regina had previously clashed with Nielsen's wife and did not give Nielsen a warm welcome. Nielsen tentatively asks about the affair between their parents, and Regina gives a scornful smile. It turns out that Nielsen and Kathy had bullied the young Regina in the past, tying her up in the deep forest at night, causing her deep psychological trauma. She has had nightmares ever since and cannot sleep well. At that time, Mads comforted her and escorted her to and from school every day, waiting for her to safely arrive home before crossing the forest himself. It seemed that this was how he disappeared. Regina has been resentful all these years for the disappearance of Mads, wondering why it was the kind-hearted Mads who vanished instead of the bully Nielsen. Nielsen always considered the bullying to be a harmless joke from his youth, but Regina disagrees. She hadn't even heard an apology in all these years. Facing Regina's condemnation, Nielsen becomes impatient. He thinks that it was Regina who had falsely accused him of raping Kathy, reporting it to Sheriff Egan, but she told him that it was all Hannah's doing as an act of revenge. Only a brainless person like Nielsen would believe the words of a twisted girl like Hannah. Hannah's goal was to destroy what she couldn't have, all hidden beneath her beautiful and innocent appearance. Nielsen leaves without saying anything, his face expressionless. He immediately searches for the file on the rape case from back then, and the witness's name is unmistakably Hannah. On the other hand, Kathy posts missing person notices every day, even though she knows her efforts might be in vain. She doesn't want to give up. Martha is also very upset about her brother's disappearance. However, with the entire family's focus on this matter, she can't accept the way she's being treated. This even leads to a conflict with her mother, and she storms off to school. Magnus is caught between his mother and sister and can only give his mother a hug. After a busy day, Kathy accidentally spots the phone bill at home, with one number frequently appearing. She dials the number and finds it's Hannah's private cell phone. Kathy hangs up without saying a word, but Hannah seems to have sensed everything. Kathy begins to suspect that it was Hannah who took Mikkel away. In a state of panic and suspicion, she vents her feelings by calling the radio station, which is currently covering the boy's disappearance. She hints that the perpetrator might be closer than anyone realizes. Later, Nielsen goes to confront Hannah. Back then, she had falsely accused him of rape because of her unrequited love. Now, she could have kidnapped Mikkel just to destroy his family. Nielsen fiercely grabs Hannah's neck, but she's not afraid at all. From the beginning, all she wanted was Nielsen. He lets her go, realizing she's no longer a tender and innocent lover, but a terrifying poison. After leaving Hannah's house, Nielsen sits in his car looking at a family photo. Suddenly, a picture of him and his brother catches his attention. The clothes on Mads are identical to those on the unidentified boy's corpse. So Nielsen rushes to the morgue at the police station. He slowly lifts the sheet, comparing his brother's photo to the boy's corpse. Nielsen's trembling hand can hardly hold the photograph, and he then touches the boy's chin, where there's a scar. The boy's corpse is indeed his long-missing brother, Mads. But how did he end up 33 years later from 1986? At school, Martha's play premieres tonight. Before the performance, Bartosz finally sees his girlfriend, who has been avoiding him for days. He carefully approaches her. He has been worried that Martha might blame him since it was his idea to explore the Winden Cave, which led to her brother Mikkel's disappearance. Martha is somewhat reluctant to face Bartosz, not because of her brother, but because of her own relationship with Jonas, her ex-lover. Bartosz tries to get closer to Martha, but she dodges him each time. Using the upcoming performance as an excuse, she sends him to the audience seats. On stage, Martha delivers her solo performance. As she recites her profound lines, thinking about the chaotic love triangle, she is overwhelmed and collapses on stage, crying. Just then, the lights in the town start flickering again. Kathy can't help but rush onto the stage and embrace her daughter. Although she had been preoccupied with Mikkel's disappearance and neglected her other two children, her love for them will never change. Alec returns home and sees his wife's cancer report. He immediately calls her. Regina is at the school, picking up her son who is watching the play. The couple doesn't mention the illness, but he expresses his love to his wife through the phone. Kathy leaves with her daughter just as Regina walks in. The long-held anger erupts under the flickering lights, and Regina doesn't hesitate to mock Kathy. After all, her husband loves her son, who is safe and sound, a stark contrast to Kathy's misfortune. Regina, who is terminally ill, finally musters the courage to say the harshest words to Kathy, who once bullied her and brought her a nightmare in her youth. Kathy, who was once a rebellious teenager, has calmed down as a mother and school principal. However, with Nielsen's infidelity and her son's disappearance, her anger is ignited. She goes as far as attacking Regina, only stopping when Magnus arrives and pulls her away. The three family members leave, and the injured Regina returns home to be greeted by her husband's warm and understanding embrace. Like a child finding a safe harbor, she hides in his arms, crying out all her fears and helplessness. Kathy's abnormal behavior leaves Martha more confused than ever. Martha realizes that even the closest family members can't truly understand each other. She never knew her mother was capable of such violence. Seeking courage, she turns to her brother's room, and Magnus takes her in. His thoughts, however, are on the necklace by the bedside. Found near the forest railway, he had secretly visited the place where Franziska hid her box during the day. Although the box was empty, he found the necklace nearby. As mentioned before, flickering lights signify someone time-traveling. During the play, the town's lights flicker incessantly, so who has time-traveled at that moment? It turns out, after learning that Mikkel is his father in a different timeline, Jonas keeps the secret and questions his mother. However, Hannah doesn't know much about her dead husband's past, only mentioning that they first met at the hospital. Jonas doesn't get any useful clues, but finally sees the mysterious man's red marks on the map, with a note to follow the signal. Immediately, he packs his flashlight and signal detector, bringing the map to Winden Cave again. Following the marked route, he ventures deeper into the cave. At the end of the route, a red rope is tied to a ring on the cave wall, the same material found on his bicycle handle. Following the rope leads him to a hidden narrow passage, which ends at a square iron door with a Celtic Trinity knot engraved on it and the word Genesis. Having come this far, there's no turning back. Jonas fearlessly pushes open the iron door and crawls into the tunnel. A gust of wind blows the door shut, and the town's lights begin to flicker. It seems this is the passage to travel through time. Meanwhile, in the dilapidated bunker, Nielsen's dad and Peter are gathered together. As the lights flicker, Nielsen's dad takes out his brown notebook with a Celtic Trinity knot engraved on the cover. The notebook records the times when the lights flicker or when someone time travels. The current time matches perfectly. In the middle of the tunnel, there are two paths. After hesitating, Jonas chooses the right path. At the end is a similar square door. When he steps out, he realizes he has arrived at the entrance of Winden Cave. Jonas walks nervously on the night road, surrounded by posters searching for Nielsen's missing brother, Mads. It's not until he encounters a young Hannah that he confirms he has traveled back to 1986. As Jonas follows the red rope, Martha is performing a play called The Labyrinth of Minos. It's an ancient Greek story about a half-human, half-bull monster named Minotaur living in the labyrinth of Minos. The people of Athens tribute 7 pairs of boys and girls to the Minotaur every year. The Athenian prince Theseus wants to save his people, and with the help of the Minotaur's sister, Princess Ariadne, he enters the labyrinth holding a ball of red thread. After killing the Minotaur, he successfully escapes and flees with the princess. However, the goddess of fate warns Theseus that their union will bring disaster, so he abandons Princess Ariadne and leaves. The story of the prince and the princess doesn't have a happy ending. Jonas spends the night in a treehouse before officially entering Winden Town in the 1986 timeline. He goes to the school, posting missing person notices for Mads everywhere. The other students seem unaffected by the disappearance. After bumping into the young Regina, Jonas confirms it's November 9th, 1986. He also learns that his grandma in this timeline is working as a nurse in the hospital. Sheriff Egon has 3 months left until retirement, and his superior asks him to focus on Mads's disappearance case. He reluctantly puts aside Nielsen's rape case for the time being. Because Mads disappeared near the nuclear power plant, where Helga was the security guard on duty that day, Sheriff Egon needs to question him and compare him to other suspects. They agree to meet at the police station in 2 days. Although it's just a simple inquiry, Helga seems nervous and guilty. On the day of the incident, Helga took the main road home instead of the forest path, which most people in the town use for convenience. Sheriff Egon notes this in his notebook. The small town experiences rainfall again. On his way back to the police station, Sheriff Egon runs into Jonas, who is from the future. As a policeman, he asks a few more questions and learns that Jonas is heading to the hospital. Sheriff Egon kindly offers him a ride and takes a shortcut through the forest to drop him off at the hospital entrance. Due to the recent child disappearance case, Sheriff Egon advises Jonas not to go out alone and to have someone accompany him whenever possible. Jonas walks into the hospital. In the backyard, he meets Nurse Inez and Mikkel. Although he already knows everything from his dead father's letter, seeing his father still alive as Mikkel gives him a great shock. Suddenly, the mysterious man appears behind him and says that they know so little about this world. Jonas wants to take Mikkel back and set everything right, but the mysterious man stops him, because if Jonas takes Mikkel back now, he would erase himself from existence. His role is more important than he realizes. Jonas hesitates. He originally wanted to bring Mikkel back, but seeing him with his mother Hannah and thinking about the possible love between their parents, he ultimately chooses to give up. He doesn't bring Mikkel home. Jonas returns through the time tunnel in Winden Cave, extinguishing the light in his hand as if to snuff out a certain possibility. After that, Jonas goes to his mother's bedside and asks her if she believes in fate. Then he answers his own question, saying that he believes his father must have loved her very much. Hearing this, Hannah suddenly breaks down in tears and embraces her son. Looking at his father's letter, Jonas tearfully burns it. He wants to bury this secret forever, even if it means losing his beloved Martha. Meanwhile, at the police station, to determine whether the boy's body is really his younger brother, Nielsen asks the coroner about a method to preserve a body undamaged for 33 years, only to be told it's impossible. So it means that when his brother's body was discovered 33 years ago, it had only been dead for about 10 hours. Nielsen finds the case file from his brother's disappearance and starts researching. He opens Sheriff Egon's notebook from that year and sees Sheriff Egon's suspicions about Helga. He also learns that Helga didn't go to the police station for questioning at the agreed-upon time. At the same time, Officer Charlotte has obtained a search warrant for the nuclear power plant but hasn't informed her colleague Nielsen. She takes a team to the power plant herself. With the search warrant in hand, Alec has no choice but to let the police in. Charlotte investigates the power plant area alone, while Nielsen calls her and shares his suspicions about Helga. However, Charlotte doesn't believe that her father-in-law, who suffers from dementia, could be involved in the disappearance case. They can't convince each other and end the call. Charlotte follows tire tracks on the ground and finds the mysterious other entrance to Winden Cave, surrounded by a metal fence. She slides down the rope and enters the cave. Years ago, Claudia had seen piles of nuclear waste barrels, but now the place is empty, with only a few traces of yellow paint revealing their past existence. The iron door that Nielsen had discovered earlier is welded shut on this side, and the weld marks appear to have been there for some time. On the other side, Nielsen secretly sneaks into the nursing home and forcefully questions Helga about why he didn't take the forest path years ago. But Helga is now a senile old man, and he keeps muttering that he can change the past and the future. This commotion alarms the nursing home staff, and Nielsen is kicked out. Seeing Nielsen getting beaten, Charlotte is speechless. His impulsiveness leads Charlotte to suspend him from duty. Nielsen reiterates his suspicions about Helga to her, but she still doesn't believe him. He doesn't argue and tells Charlotte about Sheriff Egan's suspicions. After Nielsen leaves, Charlotte falls deep into thought. Charlotte sends the one-eyed man to investigate and finds out that the Helga family's cabin seems to be connected to the Winden Cave. She drives to the cabin and calls Peter to inquire about the cabin's information. Peter's expression suggests he knows something, but he chooses to hide it from his wife. Charlotte walks down to the bunker alone, and in the corner she finds a torn piece of wallpaper. The pattern on the wallpaper is the same as the one seen in the room where the missing boy, Eric, was held captive. It seems this bunker is related to the eerie children's room. Feeling defeated, Nielsen returns home and apologizes to Kathy for not being able to find their younger son. Kathy shows no warmth as she is on the verge of anger. She has confirmed Nielsen's affair with Hannah and received a call from her mother-in-law, who is indifferent to her grandson Mikkel's disappearance and only cares about Nielsen's younger brother Mads. So she coldly mocks Nielsen, who can only turn to his mother for a chat. Nielsen's mother didn't call for no reason. Before Mads disappeared years ago, she saw the priest and a middle-aged man arguing. That morning, she saw the exact same man again, strangely unchanged and not aged at all. The man's ears had distinctive scars, and Nielsen realized the man was actually Helga. On his way home, Nielsen sees Mikkel's yellow chess piece used for magic tricks. He recalls something his son said. The question is not how, but when. This gives Nielsen inspiration, so he rushes back to the nursing home to find Helga. Unexpectedly, Helga is not in the nursing home. Nielsen finds a wooden doll in his room, which looks like the one seen by Yasin before his disappearance. Then, Nielsen discovers a book about time travel with a red thread-strung silver coin inside. Nielsen finds Helga's whereabouts, secretly follows him, and leaves a voicemail for Officer Charlotte about his findings. He explicitly points out that Helga is connected to the disappearance case and identifies the time frame as 1986. At this moment, an elderly Helga, trembling, walks into Winden Cave, followed closely by Nielsen. At this point, Helga in the 1986 timeline finishes work and prepares to drive home. He takes out his favorite chocolate, which has the same packaging and brand as the one found by Nielsen's mom and Elizabeth in the forest. Wearing a raincoat and hat, Helga enters the bunker. As night falls, he drags a boy's body out of the bunker with a silver coin around his neck. The boy's face reveals he is the missing boy, Yasin. Helga looks unhappy, filled with sorrow and helplessness. Nevertheless, he meticulously completes his task, wrapping up the body, putting a hat on the boy, and dragging him away. In the bunker at this time, instead of being decorated as the eerie children's room, there is a man with an emerald tablet tattooed on his back, cleaning the floor. When he turns around, it turns out to be Noah. Noah writes 2 dates on the wall with chalk. However, it is neither 2019 nor 1986, but 33 years earlier in 1953. Previously, it was thought that there was only a 33-year time gap between 2019 and 1986. The Emerald Tablet, the Celtic Trinity Knot, and Noah's chalk records all hint at the existence of 3 different time periods. Nielsen follows Helga into Winden Cave but soon loses him. Fortunately, he discovers the red string on the stone wall and finds the iron door with the Celtic knot carved on it. After climbing into the tunnel, he encounters a fork in the road. Nielsen decides to turn left, and he exits Winden Cave, unaware that he entered a different timeline. Nielsen is now convinced that Helga is the perpetrator of the missing children's case. While looking for Helga's whereabouts in the forest, he encounters a young boy being bullied by older children. The bullies flee upon seeing an adult. Nielsen doesn't get any information about elderly Helga from the boy, but seeing the boy's miserable state, he might be reminded of his own son, Mikkel. He advises the boy to bite the bullies if they continue to harass him. Afterwards, Nielsen runs onto the main road where a vintage car stops in front of him. A woman in red asks him for directions to a place that happens to be Nielsen's home. Oddly enough, the woman claims the house belongs to Egon's family, and the current year is 1953. The woman in red is Nielsen's grandmother, and the handsome boy beside her is Nielsen's father, a young version of him. Nielsen is startled and runs to the clock shop in panic. It turns out by choosing the left path, he entered the 1953 timeline, which is different from the 1986 dimension entered by Jonas, who chose to turn right. At this time, a young clockmaker is inside the shop. Nielsen takes out the book on time travel and believes that the author is the clockmaker. Looking at the old author's photo on the back of the book, the young clockmaker laughs and denies it's him. Nielsen confirms once again that he is now in 1953. In fact, the little boy who was rescued by Nielsen earlier was none other than the childhood version of Helga. Young Helga seemed to be a loner, riding his Tesla bicycle alone and following a police car towards the nuclear power plant. Although the power plant had not yet been constructed at that time, promotional posters had already been posted, and Helga's father, Bernd, was in charge of the project. At the power plant construction site, 2 children's bodies had been discovered. The man who came to investigate had a typical German face and was none other than the 1986 version of Sheriff Egon, who was still a young police officer in 1953. Little Helga was watching the crime scene and ran back home when he was discovered by young Egon. Bernd lived in a huge mansion, similar in appearance to the hotel run by Regina in 2019. As soon as Helge entered the house, the cold-faced mother stopped him and told him to take off all his dirty clothes. Frightened, little Helga stood pitifully in front of the entrance hall until his father returned and broke the deadlock with an intimate interaction. The relationship between Bernd and his wife was cold, and Helga told his father about what he had seen at the construction site. Bernd immediately went to the scene, while the mother handed clean clothes to her son and told him to take some money to Claudia's house for tutoring, no longer paying any attention to him. Later, the 2 boys' bodies were sent to the forensic department. Their eyes had been completely burned, making it impossible to recognize their faces. Around their necks were 1986 silver coins. This baffled Egon and the other police officers, but from their clothing we can deduce that these 2 bodies were the missing little Eric and Yasin, whose bodies had somehow ended up in 1953. Back to little Helga, he didn't immediately go to Claudia's house with the money, but went to the cabin first. With his childlike imagination, he played battle games all by himself. On the wall of the bunker were 2 dates written by Noah. After having his fill of games, Helge went to his tutoring session. The little Claudia was playing with her pet dog while waiting for the tardy Helga. Helga had a crush on the girl and hid the fact that he had been bullied by other boys. He obediently sat at the table doing math problems, waiting for her to correct them. At that moment, Nielsen's young grandmother arrived with Nielsen's father, who was still a young boy back then. Claudia's mother greeted them. The family had a vacant room upstairs and wanted to rent it to Nielsen's young grandmother for some extra income. The mother showed her the room, and Claudia took Nielsen's father on a tour of the surrounding area. While Helga was left behind, Claudia introduced the Winden Cave to Nielsen's father, and they had a great conversation. As they talked, they laughed about Helga, who was following them like a lost puppy. Angry, Helga could only play with the pet dog, throwing a stick into the cave. When the dog entered the cave and didn't return, Helga panicked and ran home. Meanwhile, Nielsen was in a clock store where the kind clockmaker gave him a drink to calm his nerves. 2 little girls came to pick up their repaired watches. One was the young Inez, and the other was Nielsen's mother. Nielsen watched them in astonishment. Little Inez talked about the nuclear power plant and the discovery of the 2 boys' bodies. After Nielsen learned about this, he immediately went to the police station, accidentally leaving his coat behind. Egon and the police officers were marking the location where the bodies were found, but Bernd was not happy. He had planned to attract political celebrities to support the power plant project, but now the appearance of the 2 bodies cast a shadow over it. He vented his anger on Officer Egon, telling him to investigate whether it was a plot by a coal factory. Egon returned to the police station just as Nielsen was causing a commotion. Nielsen wanted to confirm if the bodies were those of Mikkel. When he heard Egon's description, he quickly realized that the boys were little Eric and the boy Yasin. He breathed a sigh of relief and finally inquired about the whereabouts of the old Helga, only to find out that there was now only a young Helga. Without waiting for more information, Nielsen rushed out of the police station and arrived at Bernd's villa. Little Helga was examining the dead bird carcass he had found. Nielsen silently approached him, believing that Helga was the origin of all this. Now, little Helga looked so innocent and weak, with no threat at all. However, the future Helga had indeed killed several boys. Nielsen's sanity was on the verge of collapse. He began to repeat the words of the old Helga that he can change the past and the future. Sensing something was wrong, little Helga tried to run back home but was caught by Nielsen. He immediately bit Nielsen, then dashed toward the forest cabin. Nielsen caught little Helgi in front of the cabin, hesitated for a moment while holding a stone, and then repeatedly struck little Helga's head with it until he stopped moving. Little Helga's face was now bloody and mangled, with the left half of his face and ear destroyed. In a panic, Nielsen looked around and saw a bunker nearby. He dragged little Helga into the bunker, closed the door, and then sat on the ground, his thoughts completely empty. Officer Egan had been busy all day and returned home. Before he could chat with his wife, he was introduced to Nielsen's young grandmother. Out of professional habit, he inquired about her situation and learned that she was a widow. Her grandmother had been a resident of Winden, which is why she had moved back. Before he could ask more questions, he was interrupted by his anxious daughter. Claudia discovered that her pet dog was missing and asked her father to help find him. Egon thought the dog might be with little Helga, so he decided to go to Bernd's house. Bernd's wife received Officer Egon with an arrogant demeanor, stating that her son had not yet returned home and that their household absolutely did not allow animals. Seeing her indifferent expression, Egon had no choice but to leave in disappointment. In the 1986 timeline, the mysterious man visited the clockmaker again to continue their discussion of time. This time, they talked about black holes. The elderly clockmaker believed that black holes were entrances, with corresponding exits called white holes. They connected time and space, so crossing through this passage meant time travel. Current dualistic thinking posits that everything appears in pairs, such as black and white or good and evil. However, the clockmaker believed that this was an erroneous three-dimensional concept, and that there should be a single entity connecting past, present, and future dimensions. The mysterious man pulled out the clockmaker's book on time travel. Only 500 copies had been published, but its theories were very innovative. The man believed that the universe's cycle was 33 years. This number not only applied to the universe, but also appeared in many other places, such as Jesus performing 33 miracles and having 33 angelic prayers. Dante's Purgatory had 33 cantos, and his Paradiso also had 33 cantos. This age was also when the devil began to rule the world, and it might be the interval between two spacetimes for time travel. The mysterious man revealed that he was a time traveler, and came to find the clockmaker not just to discuss time, but also because there was a wormhole in Winden Town in 1986. The man took out a strange machine and said it was made by the clockmaker, but it was broken. This machine could create a wormhole for time travel, and he hoped the clockmaker could fix it. The mysterious man thought that the ability to time travel in the Winden cave was due to the leakage of nuclear power plant energy, as if the town was cursed. The man wanted to change all this, fix the machine, and destroy the Winden wormhole. The clockmaker, panicked, drove the mysterious man away. After he left, the clockmaker took down an object from a high cabinet, revealing the same machine, looking much newer than the one the mysterious man had. While in the 1953 timeline, the young clockmaker was about to close the shop and go home when he discovered Nielsen's coat left in the store. He hung it on the coat rack and inadvertently acquired a 2019 smartphone. As a review, Nielsen arrived in this space-time and finally understood that little Helga had been using time travel to discard the innocent boys' bodies and create unsolved cases. Nielsen was exhausted and could not stop Helga, so he could only take action against the innocent little Helga. Nielsen firmly believed that by killing the murderer, innocent children in the future would be spared. After being kidnapped into the bunker by Nielsen, little Helga didn't return home that night, and Bernd finally realized something was wrong. Bernd rushed to the police station to report the incident. Officer Egon understood that it was related to the strange man from yesterday. He immediately issued a search warrant. Bernd was filled with anxiety. As long as he could find his son, he was willing to pay any price. Bernd's wife was also worried about her child. She was very strict and harsh with Helga because she harbored a huge secret. She seemed to have had a bad experience, which made her unable to confirm whether Helga was her husband's biological son. She could only confide in the town's priest, who turned out to be Noah. Apparently, Noah was the priest who appeared in 2019 in a conversation with Elizabeth and Bartosz, and in 1986 with Mikkel. Now he has appeared in 1953 with the same appearance, proving that Noah is also a time traveler. Now that Helgi is missing, Bernd's wife realizes she still loves her son. Noah consoles her, reciting prayers, but his eyes can't help but look at Helga's photo. Officer Egon, driving his police car, happens to come across a blood-stained Nielsen. Nielsen immediately runs into the depths of the forest, hoping to return home in time through the time tunnel and see his unharmed son. Just as he was about to reach the cave entrance, Officer Egon tackles him and pulls out his gun, accusing Nielsen of being the mastermind behind the murder of the two boys and the kidnapping of Helga. Nielsen is stunned. He believed that he had already killed young Helga and changed the course of time, so the bodies of the two boys shouldn't have appeared. In Officer Egon's eyes, Nielsen is like a madman mumbling about changing history. He handcuffs Nielsen and takes him back to the police station. Little Helga was lying quietly in the bunker when he suddenly gasped for air and woke up. It turned out that yesterday he had only been choked unconscious. In the 1986 timeline, Claudia returned to the cave where nuclear waste was stored, this time with a concentration detector. The radiation index in the air wasn't high enough to be frightening. Suddenly, a sound came from the depths of the cave, and the pet dog, who had disappeared in 1953, ran out. This made Claudia even more surprised. She went to Bernd's house, wanting to know what had actually happened at the nuclear power plant. The nuclear power plant's energy had indeed leaked, but Bernd had cleaned it up and hid the unprocessable nuclear waste in the Winden cave. He replaced the damaged pipes, and only a few people, including Bernd and his son Helga, knew about the whole incident. The relevant personnel had also received generous hush money. Bernd told Claudia everything he knew, but the sudden appearance of her pet dog and the disappearance of Nielsen's brother made her suspect more. Unfortunately, Bernd seemed to be completely unaware, so she couldn't say much. Sheriff Egan was waiting at the police station for Helga to give his statement, but Helga didn't show up even after the agreed time had passed. Sheriff Egan could only go looking for him but couldn't find Helga. While in the 1953 timeline, young Helga was in the forest cabin, unaware that his old self had already traveled through time and was silently watching him. In the 1986 bunker, it was now decorated as a strange children's room. Noah and Helga were fixing a chair inside, which, according to Noah, was a time-traveling machine, still in the experimental stage. The burnt-eyed boys who appeared earlier in the story were the victims of failed experiments. Helga had dealt with the bodies of 3 children in a row, and his heart was tormented. He began to doubt the time travel experiment, but Noah was unmoved, even thinking that sacrifices were normal on the road to success. Facing Helgi's resistance, he was not afraid at all. He claimed that humanity was filthy and this world was doomed to destruction. The time-traveling chair they were researching could help them escape from evil and pain. So his name was Noah, and this was their Noah's Ark. On the other side, young Nielsen was finally released from rape accusation due to Kathy's testimony. Kathy was beaten by her own mother because of her involvement with Nielsen. However, this only strengthened her determination to be with Nielsen and to seek revenge on the person who reported her. Hannah, fearing retaliation, shifted the blame to the innocent Regina. When Kathy and Nielsen saw Regina passing by, they were filled with rage and attacked her. Suddenly, a mysterious young boy appeared to defend Regina. The stranger pulled out a gun and threatened the two to leave. Kathy and Nielsen backed down and ran away dejectedly. After the two left, the mysterious boy collapsed from exhaustion. The young boy, who had previously worn a hood and seemed to be involved in a robbery case, had been shot. Regina didn't know any of this. She only knew that the stranger had saved her. After he refused to go to the hospital, she took the initiative to treat him with a home first aid kit. The mysterious young boy was actually Regina's future husband, Alec. After treating the wound, Alec sneaked back to the forest. He took out a gun and 2 ID cards from his pocket. One was his own, but he had assumed another person's identity. Then, he hid the gun and the original ID card under a tree. However, all of this was witnessed by Hannah, who was hiding nearby. Later, Alec dressed up and, using Regina's friend's name, asked Claudia to arrange a job at the nuclear power plant for him. At first, she didn't agree, but when he came to apply the next day, she agreed on the condition that he must help her with a task and keep it a secret. Alec naturally agreed. The task was to weld the iron door of the cave, hiding the nuclear waste barrels shut, never to be opened again. Claudia didn't delve further into the matter of the nuclear waste barrels. Instead, she kept it as the nuclear power plant's secret forever. In the 2019 timeline, Hannah took a box from the depths of the cabinet, containing the gun and the real ID card that Alec hid 33 years ago. Judging by her appearance, she seemed to be up to something. Officer Charlotte was in her office browsing through the files, pondering the message Nielsen had given her earlier, hoping to find clues. Kathy suddenly burst in, looking for her husband, who didn't come home last night. Nielsen was on suspension, so he wouldn't be there. Kathy was on the verge of madness, convinced that Nielsen was bewitched by Hannah and was with her. She then stormed into Hannah's house but couldn't find Nielsen, so she confronted Hannah directly. However, in the end, Kathy sat down, defeated. Hannah was no easy target. She pretended to be an innocent victim, showing her vulnerability. She then told Kathy that although she had an affair with Nielsen, she wanted to end it, but Nielsen wouldn't let her go. Hannah was an expert liar, knowing exactly where to hurt Kathy with her words, even managing to portray herself as an innocent victim. As Kathy believed her lies and cried helplessly, Hannah feigned sympathy, patting Kathy's head while her eyes were filled with indifference. Afterward, Hannah arrived at the nuclear power plant with an appointment to give Alec a massage. However, halfway through the massage, Hannah pulled out the gun and ID card that had once belonged to Alec. She was filled with resentment towards everyone who was happier than she was, hating the wealthy lives of Alec and his wife Regina, and hating how Kathy had love without having to do anything. But most of all, she hated Nielsen. She threatened Alec to get rid of Nielsen or she would expose his secret. As Hannah left, Alec's face was filled with panic and fear. In the end, he called the one-eyed man, his inside man at the police station, asking for Nielsen's information. The adults' troubles and confusion continued, and the children were no exception. Magnus and Franziska got together, while Martha tried to contact Jonas without any response. Martha confronted Jonas, demanding an explanation for his sudden disappearance. She couldn't believe she was abandoned just like that. Jonas, in fact, deeply loved Martha, but he was destined not to be with her. He couldn't even reveal the reason, leaving Martha to resent him as he left her behind. Meanwhile, Bartosz was playing a game at home when an elderly woman suddenly appeared in his courtyard. She turned out to be the elderly version of Claudia. It seemed she had been separated from her daughter Regina for a long time. Bartosz entertained his grandmother, and his eyes showed not just surprise at her sudden appearance, but also something deeper. Elderly Claudia had originally wanted to see her daughter, but since Regina wasn't there, she handed a photo of herself and Regina to Bartosz, asking him to make sure it reached Regina. At the hotel, Regina was doing a thorough cleaning when she entered the mysterious man's room, discovering walls covered in various clippings and information. Finally, she saw a simple Celtic Trinity knot labeled with the years 1953, 1986, and 2019. At that moment, the time machine started to work at high speed. That night, Bartosz met with Noah again and realized that everything he had experienced over the past few days, including his distance from Martha and his grandmother's unexpected visit, had been predicted by Noah, so he agreed to help Noah with his task. The town experienced heavy rainfall once again, and near the cross-dresser's trailer, a large truck was parked. It was actually the truck that Alec had arranged to transport something in the middle of the night. He had entrusted the one-eyed man and the cross-dresser to help him watch over it. The truck was filled with nuclear waste barrels from the Winden cave. The mysterious man sneaked into the truck during the rainy night, attempting to steal the nuclear waste. As a review here, the young clockmaker took apart the cell phone Nielsen had left behind and tried to install a homemade battery in it. Then, the elderly Claudia visited, asking the clockmaker to help her build a machine. When he unfolded the blueprints, it was the time machine. In the future, she traveled back in time and provided the clockmaker with the time machine's design, once again proving that the future can influence the past. In the 1953 timeline, Nielsen was taken to prison for a photo investigation. When he realized that the police officer in front of him was the young Egon, he provocatively recited lyrics from a song that Egon hated the most from 1986, because the bodies of two boys were still there. Nielsen knew that little Helga must not be dead. He begged Egon to let him go, as he only wanted to find his son Mikkel. However, no one would believe him under such circumstances. As he saw no hope for release and already disliked Egon, Nielsen bluntly pointed out that Egon's wife would eventually leave him, and he would end up as a miserable alcoholic. Officer Egon looked astonished as Nielsen was taken away. Since Nielsen refused to reveal little Helga's whereabouts, the police tortured him. In the 2019 timeline, Jonas sought comfort from his grandma, who took out the suicide note of her adopted son, Mikkel. Jonas was shocked, as he had just burned it not long ago. However, this note was still brand new, so he kept it again. Grandma Inez had felt long ago that there was something off about Mikkel's background, but she never expected that, after so many years, Mikkel would choose to end his own life. Grandma Inez advised Jonas that the past had already happened, and people could only live in the present. Jonas, however, only wished for everything to return to normal and intended to change the past. As Grandma Inez watched Jonas, she couldn't help but recall the times when Mikkel had started to get close to her and perform magic tricks that she liked. When Nurse Inez asked Mikkel about his dreams, he only hoped that everything he was experiencing was just a dream, and he could wake up to find everything back to normal. Jonas was stopped by Bartosz at the school gate. As a good friend, Bartosz had never wronged Jonas, and Martha had already told him about kissing Jonas and then being abandoned. Bartosz forgave his ex-girlfriend, but couldn't tolerate his friend's betrayal. Initially, Jonas let Bartosz hit and scold him, but he couldn't bear Bartosz insulting his father. The two boys fought until Martha stopped them. Jonas turned away and left the school. When he returned home, Jonas saw the beam from which his father had hung himself and hugged his mother, promising her that everything would get better. Then he lied about going back to school and actually was about to go to the Winden Cave. He had made up his mind. Even if he disappeared from the world, he would bring his father Mikkel back and put an end to all the chaos. In the 1986 timeline, old Helga finally found young Helga, who was now obsessed with the time machine experiments. He had realized that the words Noah once used to deceive him were all lies. Developing a time-traveling machine would not lead to a better future. What Noah did was push humanity towards hellish acts. Old Helga asked young Helga not to make the same mistakes. Frightened, young Helga immediately drove away. He told Noah about the encounter, and Noah shared his own story. When Noah was young, he met a man whose words made him understand that past sufferings shape who we are today. The pain Helga was enduring would also mold him and stop him from being tormented by the traumatic experiences of his youth. Young Helga was quickly convinced by the story and regained his conviction. Their next target for the experiment was Jonas. Meanwhile, Jonas arrived in 1986 and went to Mikkel's hospital room, only to see Noah sitting by the bedside. He was then knocked unconscious by old Helga, who was hiding in the shadows. When he woke up, he found himself in the bunker decorated as a children's room. In the absence of others, the mysterious man found Jonas and told him everything he knew through the iron gate. The device in the room was a time machine, and Jonas was now the test subject. The room, or rather the bunker, was right above the Winden Cave's time travel passage. When the time travel door opened, the energy would pass through the bunker. However, the energy was insufficient, so the machine in the room was not yet fully operational. The mysterious man refused to let Jonas out. He said he had kept his father's suicide note on him for 33 years to give it to Jonas, referring to the letter Grandma Inez gave him that morning. It turned out the mysterious man was the adult Jonas. He understood the young Jonas's feelings entirely because he had experienced everything his younger self was going through. There would be no present self without the past self. Mikkel was only a small part of the town's chaos. The adult Jonas wanted to destroy the time travel passage and put an end to the turmoil completely. Naturally, he wouldn't change his past experiences, leaving Jonas alone in the room and departing. After completing his capture mission, young Helga drove home only to be hit by another car midway. Young Helga was left bloodied but not in mortal danger. When he got out of his car to check on the other driver, he discovered old Helga was the driver and had already died. Old Helga from 2019 had failed in his mission to kill himself and died in the 1986 dimension. In the clock shop, the adult Jonas pays a visit. The clockmaker shows him two machines, representing the initial and final versions of the device. After examining the old machine that the adult Jonas brought, the clockmaker finally understands how to create the original machine. The clockmaker opens a component on the machine, and the adult Jonas takes out a small container of cesium-137, which he had previously stolen from a nuclear waste barrel. The radioactive material is placed into the time machine, and with the influence of cell phone electromagnetic waves, the machine starts, creating a time black hole. The adult Jonas takes the initial machine, while the clockmaker remains unsure whether fixing the machine was right or wrong. In the 2019 timeline, Officer Charlotte is investigating a case alone. She is shocked to discover that the suspect in the 1953 young boy's murder case and the kidnapping of little Helga is printed in the newspaper as Nielsen. Her police instincts tell her that all the clues point to Helga. At this time, her husband Peter sends her a message saying they need to talk, but Charlotte has no time to deal with it. Peter is sitting with Nielsen's father in the bunker, anxiously waiting for something. To understand why these two are together, we need to go back to the day Mikkel disappeared. At that time, Peter had lingered near the cross-dresser's trailer for a long time, but ultimately overcame his desires and did not break his promise to his wife. He went to the bunker to pray for forgiveness from God. Suddenly, a mysterious black hole crack appeared on the bunker's wall, and a boy's body was thrown out. The body belonged to Nielsen's younger brother Mads from 1986. A terrified Peter immediately contacted Nielsen's father. After 33 years, the sight of Mads' body brought Nielsen's father to tears. Then the elderly Claudia appeared without warning. Without time for explanations, she told Peter and Nielsen's father to place Mads' body where it should be found. The elderly Claudia told the two about time travel and left the brown notebook with Nielsen's father, noting the specific times major events would occur. After verifying the events over 8 days, Nielsen's father completely believed the woman's words. But Peter was still hesitant because the latter half of the notebook was torn out. The last record in the notebook indicated that after today, everything would change. On the other hand, Noah was telling Bartos about the truth of the future. He said that the adult Jonas would destroy the cave, but he didn't know that he was the one who created it. It turned out that trying to destroy the wormhole was also a paradox. The act of destruction was actually the cause of the wormhole's emergence. Noah said that the adult Jonas was a pawn in the hands of the elderly Claudia, and the lives of the people in Winden Town were just sacrifices for higher interests. This was an eternal war between good and evil, with both sides vying for control over time travel, divided into light and dark factions. Noah told the Bartos that they were on the side of justice and light, and no matter the methods, even if cruel and ruthless, they must ensure that every step in the present aligned perfectly with the past. The side represented by Claudia had completely lost their humanity and embraced darkness. Bartos was still doubting his words. Noah warned him never to trust Claudia, or else he would become a puppet being manipulated. With that, Noah handed his brown notebook to Bartos, encouraging him to face the changes tonight and beyond with strength. The adult Jonas, holding the time machine, arrived at the tri-junction of the Winden Cave's time-space tunnel. He activated the time machine using the electromagnetic waves from his cell phone. As all 3 cylindrical grids rose, the machine began to operate, and it seemed as if time and space overlapped. Traces of a wormhole appeared above the machine. In Winden Town in the years 1953, 1986, and 2019, all lights started flickering, and the ground began to shake. People from different times unknowingly waited for something in the flickering lights. At that moment, a giant wormhole suddenly appeared in the sky above the town. The elderly Claudia reached out her hands amidst the flying ash. At the same time, in the bunker above the tunnel, little Helga, who had just woken up from unconsciousness, was hiding in fear. A huge black hole gradually formed in the room, connecting the bunker space in 1986 and 1953. On the 1986 side was Jonas. The 2 boys approached the black hole, seeing each other and instinctively reaching out to touch hands. The moment their fingertips connected, little Helga was transported to the bunker decorated as a children's room in 1986, while Jonas saw a bunker filled with relationship maps of the townspeople. To determine the time period, he immediately ran outside and saw the entire town covered in flying ash, with a war-torn and desolate scene. A fully armed group appeared and captured the bewildered Jonas. As a high-tech fighter jet flew across the sky, a scarred woman simply said, "Welcome to the future." This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.